So for most people, when we first get into spirituality, it is personal. It's I want something from this. I want to quiet my mind. I want to gain a sense of peace. I want to feel comfortable in my body. I want to feel at peace with the world. We can phrase it in any number of ways, but there's, if we look at it, we can see that there's a personal payoff there, a hoped for personal payoff. I hope at some later date when all this pays off that I will be more peaceful. So we can see that underlying this is a personal desire, and that's fine. Life will use whatever it needs to. And we could phrase it in more exalted terms. We could say, I want to find God. I want to be with the divine. I want to get enlightened. Same movement expressed in somewhat more grandiose terms. But there's still a sense of, if that becomes possible at some later date, not now, of course, but at some later date, then I will feel better, hopefully eternally blissful. And so we can also see, despite this sort of very exalted kind of desire, it's still rooted in the personal, that when I get enlightened, then, well, everything will be great. For who? For me, of course. So that we can see, when we are willing to look objectively, that there's still a personal element in that. And the sense of personal self is really strong in this culture. There's very, very few things that we would willingly give up this life, maybe for an ideology that we believe needed to be defended, maybe to trying to save our beloved child from immediate harm. We might be willing to risk or lose our life for in the service of that. But fortunately, most of us will not be faced with those kind of choices, but we are faced basically on a daily basis with how we spend our time and energy and in service to what. And those can be just normal, practical, human kinds of activities, earning a living, taking care of a household, maintaining friendships, volunteering for a worthy cause. All of this can have an element of the impersonal, but when we really look closely, we can also see the personal at work here, that it is the sense of, when I, am a responsible provider for my family, it feels good. I get this appreciation, I get love from my family, and, it feels good. And that's okay. I'm not saying, therefore, if we're in search of the impersonal self, that we need to be irresponsible. That would be silly. But it's good to just acknowledge that in many of the things that we do day to day, it is in service to this sense of personal self. And that's fine. And personal self needs a certain amount of care and attention to function in this existence. It's just one of the rules of playing on this field, and that's okay. Okay, so when the difficulty arises is when in spirituality we hear, say, a concept of unity with the divine, unity with the totality of existence, and this sense of me, this sense of a separate personal self, believes that it somehow is a distant goal, like a particular state where I can realize this unity that I've heard about that I want. Who exactly wants that? Well, me, of course. So here's this separate self wanting unity with all. But it wants it sort of on its own terms. Like I want the feeling of unity with all, but I want to be the one that's having that experience. So that's the challenge, right? And the separate self is trying to figure out how to do that, right? How do I, as a separate self, experience unity? How do I do that? What do I have to do? Do I have to, I don't know, meditate 2 hours a day for the next 30 years? Will that result in a recognition of unity? We don't know, right? We don't. But we believe that there's something I have to do to get from where I believe I am now to where I imagine I want to be. And what will that feel like when that is experienced at some later date? And it's like, well, it'd feel good, obviously. I want that. Right? So again, who is it that wants that? The sense of personal self. So it's good to be able to see that sense of personal self operating in normal day-to-day activities, which is fine, no problem. It's just believing that the same movement applies. But the actuality of it is that what's holding this sense of separation in place is an idea. It is an idea of who I am. It's an identity, a belief in our own personal self-identity. This is me, If this side of my skin is me, that side of my skin is everybody else. And how do I know that? Well, I can look down, I can see this body, I can touch it, I can, if I put my hands together, one hand fills the other hand, I can feel myself eating food, I can smell, I can see, I can taste. Obviously, the conclusion is, well, that's me. But what that actually is a sensing organism, an amazing, wonderful, beautiful sensing organism that's capable of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching other appearances within this grand creation. But all of that is an appearance within the awareness that we are. So back to the analogy of being in the room, there's the awareness, and then there's the appearances within the awareness, one of which is this body-mind. So if our insistence is that I am this body-mind, then that is the way we convince ourselves that we're separate from the rest of totality. I am this separate, discrete organism, and everything outside of that's different. And then what's the organism left with? How do I, as an appearance in physicality, how do I experience unity with the rest of existence? But the very seeking is founded on the assumption of what I am. And as long as we have that assumption, and it's the separate self trying to find unity, where is it? I've heard it's nearby here, where I just have to find it somehow, can feel very frustrating because it's based on a false assumption, namely, I'm separate from that. But even on just a conceptual level, the idea that somehow me as this skin-tight organism is somehow separate from existence, separate from nature, separate from the totality, as if, this was a creation of some alternative creator, alternative source, is, well, it's a bit arrogant, actually. Somehow me, different, special, apart from the totality. I mean, how is that even possible? But if we believe that, belief is all that's needed in order to create that sense of separation. So if we're asking ourselves the question, how do I as a separate being attain a sense of unity? That question is not answerable. It's not possible. What is possible is to ask whether the originating assumption is true. Is it really true that what I am is this body-mind? Right? So we're not denying that the body-mind exists. It clearly does. But it exists as an appearance within consciousness. Consciousness is required to know that there is a body-mind present. Body-mind's needed as a sensing organism in order to sense into its surroundings. Beautiful, no problem. But without the awareness, we wouldn't know whether there was a body-mind there or not. So what we can do is really look at the underlying assumptions to see, when we look closely, if the sense of personal me that we've all been brought up with, whether it's actually true, whether it actually exists. So when we go looking, we can find, we can find memories, we can find hopes and dreams and regrets and fears and opinions and ideas and resumes and all kinds of ways we identify ourselves. The only thing that we can find is this source of this personal self. And yet, during all this seeking to find this personal self, the one thing that is present, witnessing our struggles, is this quiet, ever-present awareness. But if one of our assumptions is that the awareness is a derivative of neurons in our brain, well then we just got all tied up in the knot, and the only thing we're left with is this physicality. But if we acknowledge that we don't actually know the source of this awake, aware presence, then it is what it is. And what we can see about it is that it is the most essential aspect of our being. By most essential aspect, I just mean that it doesn't come and go. It's not subject to the law of impermanence. Everything else is. The body certainly is. Thoughts are. Emotions certainly are. Cells certainly are. Everything that we take ourselves to be, other than this awareness, is subject to impermanence, coming and going, in transiency all the time, except for this awareness, which, although formless, has the sort of ever-present quality going for it. So from when we are willing to loosen our grip on this belief, this dogged belief in what I am as a personal separate self, then perhaps we can get a glimpse of just this underlying, fundamental, essential quality of just awake presence, the awareness that is always there, by whatever name you like. And to the extent that that awareness can, when we consent to it, when we consent to its fundamental quality, it has a way of flowing. There's a flow quality to it in this lifetime when we're no longer imposing our personal wants on it. By wants, I just mean anything that's mentally conceived that we impose on top of what's actually happening. So everything like doubt or regret or shame or hope or fear or opinions or judgments, all of that are mental impositions on top of just this awake presence. So to the extent that we can just see that very conditioned tendency to function through our conditioned self, without trying to oppose it or make it go away, but just see how it operates, tends to diminish its sticky quality. And what we're left with is more and more just this sense of flow, life moving through this form. So it's not opposed to this form. This form is a beautiful expression of the same source. And this life force that we're talking about is already what's living this life. It's just our insistence that, no, it's me. I'm the one living this life. It's just that movement that holds us separate from